Ryan, part of the way we started this conversation is that you said there is a little bit of good news, but in all of that news, there was economic news that came out on that front on Thursday, but buried in all of that news, literally buried in a BEA PDF that you sent our way, is some news about the housing market.
Right, so this is coming from the GDP report that you saw yesterday, the headline being that after 2 quarters of negative growth of the economy shrinking, it's back to growing at a 2.6% rate. We'll see if that gets adjusted in the future. But the biggest, or one of the biggest drags on the economy was in housing. And now this is to be expected from, not just expected, but kind of done on purpose from what the Federal Reserve has been doing by tightening monetary policy. Matt Stoller would be very happy, I think, in some ways, sort of, to see this, but not. What Matt wants to see is rents go down rather than a complete housing crash, and I don't know if you can get both. But so let's put up this from this. Yeah, this is Bureau of Economic Analysis. Within residential fixed investment, the leading contributors to the decrease were new single-family construction and brokers' commissions. And so, brokers' commissions is obvious. That means people aren't buying and selling houses, which is going to push the prices of houses down, less demand, that pushes prices down. That's and you're already seeing rents start to come down. The other part is wild. So in other words, with mortgage rates at over 7% at this point, home builders are like, well, we're not building homes right now. Because you just crushed all of the demand. And so if you are trying to get prices down, and you believe in supply and demand, basic supply and demand, there's 2 ways you can do that. Reduce demand so fewer people can buy homes, or reduce or shrink the economy, which then reduces the supply. The other way to get prices down would be to increase the supply, so that now instead of 10 houses in an area, there are 50 houses in an area. Yeah. So all of a sudden now, those become more affordable. That, with a growing population, would seem to be like the way that a sensible society would want to bring prices down, because we're not going to have fewer people.
Well, yeah, I see housing as one of the weird, sneaky and quiet things that affects a million other things in our politics, but that we absolutely never talk about. We're just not talking about any, even culture warriors who want to talk about the fertility rate and want to talk about the marriage rate. Housing is a huge aspect of that, and this is coming on the heels of something you hear very little about, at least in conservative circles. You hear a good amount about it on the left, although I would argue it's still too little. Housing shortage that is creating this totally out of touch aspect of what people consider the American dream, right? Young home ownership. That's your investment, that's your property, that's stability, and that's the sort of place that you build the rest from. That was already out of reach for a host of reasons, but a huge one of those reasons is that there's not enough housing, and there's specifically not enough what people consider starter homes, which is under 2,000 square feet, and I forget the price metric there, but this is taking a really, really bad situation, not just for our politics, but also for our culture, and making it way worse.
And there's an argument that, and plenty of people on the left would say this, that fewer single-family homes is good. And if you look at Europe, they're like, what's going on over? What are you guys doing? All these just endless homes. Yeah. Why don't you guys live in row homes or in apartments or in multifamily housing? Where do you get all this space? And so it's not a given that everybody is going to have a starter home, is going to have their own home. That was kind of the American bargain. That was the American dream that was sold to people. Okay, we got a lot of problems here. There's a lot of upward social mobility, a lot of downward social mobility. But we do have a contract here that if you work hard, you can own your own home, and your children have a chance of doing better than you did. That's the basic bargain. Now that we're pulling that bargain out, we're saying actually, not so much. And the Fed, by turning this around, could create a kind of structural fundamental shift in construction that just says, the single family homes we've got, that's what we're going to go with. From now on, we're doing, multifamily homes, apartments, condos,
Well,
row
and
homes.
so could lawmakers on the local level, like across the board. And obviously, they are deeply involved
Which we kind of need also.
zoning
Like,
questions. Yeah, but the New York Times actually had a super interesting dive into basically the death of the starter home that they published last month. And here's a paragraph from it. They wrote, "From a builder's view, there's nothing particularly preferable about higher end homes. The profit margins aren't generally higher. They demand more customization. They're riskier to build in economic downtimes. Entry-level housing, on the other hand, is invariably in deep demand." So where did it go? But the demand question, I think, is interesting too, because I actually would totally believe that demand has gone down, just because a lot of people have people my age have been conditioned to see this as something that is out of reach, right? Like since the Great Recession, it was the talking point is that this is out of reach, and that's true for a lot of reasons. But I think it's also sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy to that extent, because people don't even look. I mean, I know there are jokes about Zillow now. Like SNL did a great sketch about like people scrolling Zillow. And listen, we've all done that, but the idea that you would actually sort of make a move on it is a totally different question, and I feel like a lot of people just genuinely see that as out of reach. So I think maybe there's a chunk of demand that probably isn't there where it used to be, but at the same time, the demand in general is absolutely there.
Right, but demand like from your heart is different than demand coupled with the ability to pay.
Yeah.
And so if you're slowing down the economy, what that means is that people have less money, unemployment goes up, people are in deeper debt. So demand isn't just like, that would be nice. It's like, that would be nice, but I can also afford it.
Right.
And did the Times say it was mostly about affordability, or what was their takeaway?
That it just zoning reforms, basically. Like zoning law is one of the reasons that a lot of this hasn't happened, and that it's just kind of a market. What's the best way to describe it? Maybe
no
just
man's land market kind of thing?
Yeah, it's just like falling through the cracks of the market, the idea of the starter home. And I thought it's particularly interesting that they're saying, well, it's not like it's worse for developers. It's not like developers are doing this because of the invisible hand. Like there actually is a market incentive for that, including demand. As they say, there's invariably deep demand for affordable starter homes. So it's a really serious problem. It's the same thing, like just coming from the perspective on the right, it's the same thing with student loans, right? Like we cannot be talking about marriage and children and not paying attention to the fact that people are drowning in student loan debt. You and I disagree on what the solution should be to that, but the fact that like it's the same thing with housing, student loans, there are all of these kind of financial issues that the right has for a really long time sort of shrugged and left to the market and said the market will sort of work this out, that the invisible hand will sort of guide us to fitting all of these puzzle pieces together. But that has wreaked havoc on the culture too. It's wreaked havoc on things that Republicans really purport to care about right now. And again, like a lot of people probably disagree on what the solutions are. I'm just saying they don't even talk about these things.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I think is going on is because they have kinked so much multifamily housing and so many apartments by the NIMBY NIMBY blockages, that there are a lot of single-family homes that are now occupied by lots of people.
Yeah.
Like say you got a group house with like 4 people in their 20s living in it who are all professionals, or they're all they're exactly you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So if then you build more multifamily housing, you build more apartments, like that those people might prefer to live in, because then they get their own space. Then you free up all of this other housing for actual families, single family housing for single families.
Right.
So it's not necessarily an either or. If you're saying like, hey, we need more single family homes, well, one way to free up more single family homes is to make it so that you're not packing so many people into so many of them. Give those people a place.
And I think the broader point is that this indication that you pulled from the BEA, I think I have the exact sentence in front of me. Real GDP turned up in the third quarter, increasing 2.6% after decreasing 0.6% in the second quarter. The upturn primarily reflected a smaller decrease in private inventory investment, an acceleration in non-residential fixed investment, and an upturn in federal government spending that were partly offset by a larger decrease in residential fixed investment and a deceleration in consumer consumer spending, imports turned down. That's the paragraph that you pulled out. And you can see how all of these things are happening on the surface, and then beneath that is lurking, I think, something pretty troubling. And this is going to, this is throwing gasoline on that fire. I mean, I don't mean that with the sense of like intentionality, but it's making a bad situation worse.
Although it is kind of intentional.
Well, it's not like they don't know that that's going to happen.
If the reduction in brokers' fees can warrant a mention in the overall GDP, its impact on overall GDP, that is a massive reduction. Suck to be a real estate broker right now.
Yeah.
If you're watching this, I feel for you. This must have been a rough couple months.
And again, taking a bad situation and making it worse in ways that will ripple out. So we'll continue to pay attention to that.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.